Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, guys, again, this is from cs.cmu.edu. Right now, I'm going to be writing down everything that I read to do my best not to duplicate stories. But again, what I find when I research into former Scientologists and or I might want to say researchers or truthers, a lot of the information duplicates. Sometimes I don't mind duplicating certain stories, but I don't want to be reading the same things too much. So I'm going to do my best to balance it. The Scandal of Scientology by Paulette Cooper, Chapter 10. The Suppressives. People don't deserve to have Scientology as a divine right, you know. They have to earn it. L. Ron Hubbard, allegedly. What does that sound like, a narcissist? Does that sound like a narcissist, you guys? You always got to be trying to earn the privilege of being liked by them or getting points from them or going against whomever they deem an enemy. Sound familiar? Even worse than what happens to an outsider who tries to attack Scientology is what happens to a Scientologist who turns against or displeases the group. You know, someone who asks questions. Questions are illegal. Big Brother's always watching, you guys. They too may be investigated. Although in that case, the investigation is quite simple. The Scientologists can go right to the pre-clears file. You know, the PC file, just like they have in the military. Huh. And his intimate secrets, it's the blackmail material, and confessions. Imagine a religion that interrogates, especially interrogating children, or making children interrogate grown adults with sexual questions. Confessions are all there. Furthermore, Hubbard made it clear that he wanted these secrets. If anyone feels like leaving, wrote Hubbard, just examine the records and sit down and list everything done to and withheld from me in the organization and send it along. We'll save a lot of people that way. Reminds me how secret societies work, but, what do I know? In a policy letter of April 19, 1965, Hubbard also laid down similar guidelines. Any pre-clear, you know, a lot of the children are pre-clears, right? Everybody know that the children are pre-clears, most of them? Yeah. They always omit the word child for the most part. They're like genius at it. They know how to manipulate language. Whomever's writing this. Hint, hint. Any pre-clear blowing an org, getting up and leaving, without reporting to the technical secretary, director of processing, and the ethics section first, and who will not permit an auditor to handle the matter at the org where the auditing occurred, must be fully investigated by the ethics sections at any cost. Look at that, guys, at any cost. Don't you guys wonder what Rinder knew about at any cost? Don't you wonder what Rathburn knew about at any cost? You guys remember what I posted? Someone admitted about, I don't want to go into it because, but I read it, and there were some very heinous crimes that Rathburn was accused of. Somebody wound up dead. Yeah. Is that the R2, what do they call it, the R245 file? Hubbard, allegedly wrote that. Go look it up, please. The following is a letter Hubbard wrote to the secretary of the Melbourne, Australia headquarters about a boy who apparently blew an org. A boy, you guys! Doesn't a boy constitute a child? Adults are supposed to protect children, right? Right? I wonder what was happening to that little boy. The one with no name. Who apparently blew an org, i.e. left or did something equally heinous. What would cause a little boy to run away? Don't you guys wonder about that? Horner blew up in our faces and had his certificates canceled. They always do that. You know what that is? It's moving. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Someone was at the door. Horner blew up in our faces and had his certificates canceled. We're talking about a child, by the way. Isn't that amazing? We have a criminal background on him. R of a girl. Pre-clear in Dallas. And countless others. Well, not like, let's just keep it real. Let's just keep it real. How often do these RISTs, these RAPISTS, actually have to serve time? Let's just keep it 100. Let's keep it 100. And a lot of police officers that do that, and let's just be honest, we know all cops don't condone that. Sometimes they got to get a lesson, if you know what I'm saying. This will do something to blank. This is in Dallas, you guys. Now, I firmly believe you will be able to find a criminal background this life on 2 more Australian Scientologists, as no such occurrence anywhere in the world has failed to find one. I'd grab him when he comes in and security check it, interview. If they won't cooperate, you have suspected criminal activities. Says the organization with the most openly criminal background. It's a through penny push now. Never heard of that before. Through penny. Horner, possibly Nibs, all tie in to a neat network. We're pulling it apart. Paulette needs to do a little explaining. I'm getting lost here. This same Horner, the one who allegedly R'd a pre-clear, probably a child. I think that it was. Because they're into that over there. Was once such a dedicated Scientologist. Did he have stats up? Did he have stats up? That he wrote a book on the subject. I can't help but think of what is his name? Paul Haggis? Yeah, they still have that movie by Thoreau in which they highlight Paul Haggis, who is now a convicted RIST. And I don't think that with him it was a setup. I don't believe that. I believe it was 100% legit. It's my opinion. It's free to have an opinion. People need to get their heads out of their behinds. He wrote a book on the subject, and in it referred to Hubbard as one of the greatest geniuses of the 20th century. Please. Whose discoveries will make possible a new era of living for man. In addition, the man referred to above as Nibs, whom Hubbard apparently saw as part of this conspiracy or whatever, is the nickname for L. Ron Hubbard Jr., Hubbard's own son, who was a Scientologist until he quit in 1959. Go and watch the interview. I think it was Playboy that interviewed him about how Nibs explained how L. Ron Hubbard was helping to move cocaine and other drugs from South America somewhere. Shocking, I know, right? The Australian Inquiry, which reprinted that letter, also had a few comments on the veracity of the statements. It is now said that accusations against Horner of criminal background and of the R of a girl, that would make him a pedophile, you guys. You guys getting that? R-ing a little girl is a pedophile. Maybe we needed predator poachers to go set this guy Horner straight. Yeah, go check out Predator Poachers or Dion. Yeah, they're getting them. The R of a Girl PC. There you go. Pretty clear. In Dallas and countless others. Unbelievable, you guys. This just boils my blood. This boils my blood. This boils my blood. And countless others were unfounded. Unfounded, you guys. Janie's got a gun. Janie's got a gun. Horner returned to the fold, and when last heard of, was the leading overseas Scientologist. Because, promote the pedophiles. Maybe using this word is what's getting my videos like on the Magic 20. I don't think I'm going to stop using that word. Who probably would be extremely surprised to know of his criminal background. So irresponsibly publicized by Hubbard. There was no justification for the other accusations. Hubbard was merely irresponsibly asserting, as was his practice, that anyone out of line with Scientology had a criminal or communist or homosexual background. So, okay. I got all worked up. So what we're saying is that this was trumped up charges? I'm sorry, Paulette. I really admire you, Paulette Cooper. But you need to be a little clearer because it's getting a bit confusing. It appears that few other Scientologists have gotten out of it or spoken against their group, though. Perhaps because one of the Scientology codes stated that no member was permitted to speak disparagingly of Scientology to outsiders or members of the press. Well, let's see. Whom else follows these guidelines? Doesn't the Catholic Church follow similar guidelines? Jehovah's Witnesses, the Kingston Tribe, Children of God cult? Must be a coincidence, huh? All these insular communities? It must be some kind of coincidence, right? This seems to work both ways, and in addition to not speaking against Scientology, Scientologists rarely listen to arguments against it either. Aren't they going to get sick and get a flu and die or something if they listen to some of this stuff? And have little opportunity to hear both sides of the story. In fact, Hubbard told them never to discuss Scientology with a critic. Just discuss his or her crimes, known or unknown, and act completely confident that these crimes exist, because they do. As a co-committant to the Scientologists, rarely participate in panel discussions, perhaps because of their aversion to confrontation with critics. We need to let go of this title, too, as well. It's got to go. Every time I see critic, we're going to call ourselves questioners. But also because Hubbard wrote them, why give some other subject an audience before which it could air its views? Most Scientologists are anxious to adhere to this code and not speak against Scientology, so much so that when one alleged Scientologist committed bluicide in England, wish we had his name, because we could do a rest in peace video. Maybe she did that for liability purposes, I'm not sure. He left a note saying his bluicide had nothing to do with Scientology. You guys have heard the stories. I'm just going to put it out there. We've heard this numerous times. How many times have former Scientologists come out and state that they were told by other Scientologists to go K themselves? And, word to the wise, whomever's doing this in Scientology, the criminal activities that you're doing, a suicide note would never, people don't do that when they write suicide notes. Just look it up. Apparently the police couldn't figure that out. And I'm hard on the police, but we've got to be honest. You know, one or two departments of the police officers cannot just take this down completely. They need support from federal agencies, maybe other world agencies. I mean, you can't just, and in fairness to decent police officers, Scientology has more money and power than many of these blue collar cops do. You know, you got the corrupt cops and then you got the decent ones. Had nothing to do with Scientology. Again, nobody's going to do that. Don't you guys wonder who forced this guy to do this? Don't you guys wonder who coercively told him to take his own life? I do. I do. Could they be no longer on Earth? Don't you guys wonder about that? And I personally, man, I'm on a rant today, you guys. I personally do not trust. Now, ex-Scientologist, please understand, I'm not talking about every single one of you. But I want to be absolutely clear. There are a lot of ex-Scientologists, and I mean like more from the so-called upper ranks, which they never shut the F up about it either. Oh, I was on OSA. Oh, I work with David Miscavige. They never stop talking about it. And they also go into the, oh, it's David Miscavige doing this. Birds of a feather. Birds of a feather. Okay. Had nothing to do with Scientology or with his being a member of a group. When have you guys ever seen a Blue Side note like that, right? Ever. Ever. Later on, another case, and they should have done a handwriting analysis on it. Facts. Facts. Later on, another case will be presented of someone who wanted to commit bluicide, but was afraid that if he did so, it would invalidate Scientology. Allegedly. Paulette sure did source her material, too. I can appreciate that. Some of these new writers don't have any freaking clue what's going on. They just use AI to do everything. Lazy. But in the past, if a Scientologist did decide to say something against Scientology, perhaps, to publicly disavow it, or report or threaten to report it to civil authorities, he was immediately declared a suppressive person, and sometimes an enemy of Scientology. A suppressive person was immediately dropped from Scientology, and no Scientologist in the world was permitted to associate with him. That's the insular world that these secret societies create. Yeah, I said it. Go check it out. Perhaps this doesn't seem like much of a punishment to the reader, but remember that the Scientologist has often withdrawn from his former friends and family and spends his time mainly with Scientologists. He may not have a job to go to, since he may have left his job to work for the org, and he may have divorced his former spouse and remarried someone in the group. None of the people can have anything to do with him. They also love to separate the spouses. At various times, the Scientologists have treated suppressive in an even worse manner. In 1965, they wrote that the homes, properties, places, and abodes of persons who have been active in attempting to suppress Scientology or Scientologists are all beyond any protection or Scientology ethics. In an earlier code, it said, I pledge myself to punish, to the fullest extent of my power, anyone misusing or degrading Scientology to harmful ends. Sounds like state evidence, police officers, sheriff's departments, FBI, Homeland Security, right there. I pledge myself, like pledging in a lodge. I pledge myself to punish to the fullest extent of my power anyone misusing or degrading Scientology to harmful ends. You guys think these fools haven't gone after cops? And that's going to be some of my new research. I'm going to go in, you guys. I'm going in. I probably could never stop doing this. I mean, I might stop the online activity one day, but I ain't never going to stop talking about this. In an earlier code, it said, I already read that. At one time, an enemy of Scientology was defined as someone who could be deprived of property or injured by any means by a Scientologist, may be tricked, sued, lied to, or destroyed. That sounds like something the courts need to hear, doesn't it? Anyone who's connected to a suppressive, in other words, anyone who knows him, no matter how vaguely, was reviewed and had to pay for this review. If it came out that he was indeed connected, this friend or acquaintance was declared a potential trouble source, PTS, and also could not receive Scientology processing until he handled. You know, by the way, they pay for the handling as well. Isn't that great, you guys? Freaking amazing. In other words, persuaded the errant person to make amends, you know, like a child, or disconnected from that person, meaning that he too could have nothing more to do with the suppressive, even if it was his spouse, lover, child, parent, etc. The PTS also had to publish the fact in one of the Scientology publications. Look, you guys, more state evidence. Scientology publications should be state evidence, but apparently nobody knows how to get evidence anymore for crimes. The PTS also had to publish the fact in one of the Scientology publications and then take any required civil action such as disavowal, separation, or divorce. Since the PTS was not permitted to talk to the suppressive, he usually disconnected by sending him a letter, usually on little scraps of paper and sometimes signed off with love, stating that he could no longer have anything to do with the suppressive and implying or stating that the suppressive reconsider and reform himself. Huh. Kind of like no J, no job? Huh. Which meant taking more Scientology courses. If the PTS, which they have to pay for, of course, if the PTS refused to disconnect from the suppressive, he was charged with high crimes. That's like that video. Do you guys remember seeing the video where they were following, I think they were following Rinder, or it was Rathburn, someone, and this blonde lady with curly hair was like, "What are your crimes, Mark? What are your crimes?" And became a suppressive person and outcast also. A person did not have to be a Scientologist to be suppressive. In the New York org, the night watchman was said to have been declared suppressive for misdeeds that ranged from stealing from the petty cash box. Anyone say set up? How easy it is to set somebody up like that. Someone tried to set me up once. It didn't go well for him. To saying that Scientology didn't work. Nor does the suppressive have to be an adult. Let's just say this again for the people in the back, like Serge always says. Nor does the suppressive have to be an adult. One 10-year-old boy was declared a suppressive because he refused to disconnect from his father. Do you guys see how sad that is? That makes me want to cry. Another Scientology suppressive, now an outspoken critic of the group, called Scientology the beginnings of not see party. They're all working together, by the way. In court, during an American tax case, Mr. Raymond J.D. Buckingham, a very accomplished English basso who administers a voice school in Manhattan, initially got into Scientology through one of his pupils. She agreed, that's how they infiltrate. She agreed to give him $30 worth of processing. That's interrogation. It's not processing. In return for an equal amount in voice lessons. At first, he was so impressed with Scientology that he convinced several of his students, along with his fiancée, to undergo auditing interrogation. I added that. But he began to get disillusioned when he discovered that his auditor was revealing personal information about him to a friend of hers, and worse, still that his fiance's auditor, a reverend. No, they don't have reverends in Scientology. What do they call them? They have a different name. Was propositioning her. You guys, how many stories have we heard about the auditors doing this stuff? Just, I mean, the slime of the slime, you know? It's just, ugh. When he complained about the situation to the Scientologists, however, they said they would speak to him about it only if he would agree to pay them $25 for the first session of advice. He agreed, but they then said they wouldn't talk to him unless he disconnected from a business partner. It seemed that the Scientologists had also labeled the partner a suppressive person because he was connected to a suppressive. Buckingham then had the incredible courage to speak against Scientology on a radio show, and the Scientologists countered by declaring him a suppressive person outside their protection and fair game. Those of his students who had become Scientologists, at his recommendation, were ordered to disconnect from him, and also from any money they legally owed him. This represented a loss of about $200 a week for him. It's a lot back then. One of his students, a famous singer in whom he had invested almost $30,000 as her agent, told him that she had learned in her auditing sessions that you K'd me in my past 15 lives. See what they do in these auditing sessions? They implanted these crazy thoughts into her head. It's sick. Sick. Then she not only disconnected from him, but also from the arrangements he had made for her to perform in summer stock theaters. Wow, talk about betrayal. The loss almost ruined him, and her as well, since she was fined by Actors Equity and left the country. How long it take them to put her on staff? Wonder how old she was. During this time, he was also receiving phone calls in the middle of the night from men and women threatening to kill him. I want to say something, but I can't do it on YouTube. And his fiancée, who at first didn't leave Scientology and join him, was held in a room at the org for 4 hours until she agreed to sign a statement saying that Buckingham had threatened to kill her. The story does have a happy ending. 3, in fact. Mr. Buckingham and his fiancée eventually did get married. The 10-year-old child who was declared suppressive 4 years ago is now one of Mr. Buckingham's voice students. So he's 14 years old. And all 3 have left Scientology. Don't you guys wonder where this 14-year-old little boy is living? Maybe they agreed to help him? Yeah, that's what parental love and parental protection is like when you protect children. And all 3 have left Scientology. Scientology, however, has not left them, and they still receive mail urging them to step into the exciting world of the totally free. That's the inversion, you guys. Everything that L. Ron Hubbard allegedly did, everything's an inversion. They're the biggest prisoners I've ever seen in a cult. That's my experience. The most trapped, imprisoned cult I've ever seen in my life. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but what I mean is they have policies written to entrap them, to keep them in debt, which is debt servitude, as well as blackmail, threats, and what is that debt that they call? Freeloader's debt, which is not... Freeloader's debt is not legally they cannot collect it. 2 other stories of Scientologists who left the group did not have such happy endings. In the first case, the director of the Scientology Institute in Bulawayo, Africa, a man named John Kennedy, was said to be responsible for the success of Scientology in Rhodesia. Naturally, Hubbard was pleased with him, and in an early issue of Ability, he wrote that Kennedy and his wife both knew which side of the E-meter is up. They respect you, they are Scientologists, they have goals. Unbeknownst to Hubbard, one of their goals was leaving Scientology and setting up a similar organization called the Institute of Mental Health. They set up headquarters in Johannesburg and brought in a large number of Scientologists with them, naturally infuriating the other Scientologists. Kennedy died shortly thereafter in a shooting accident. Come on, you guys. Come on. Shooting accident? It is said he shot himself accidentally. And we're supposed to believe this, right? He doesn't sound like a kind of man to me that would know how to operate a GUN. Stated the Daily Mail on July 14th, 1968. But an open verdict was returned by the coroner. Yeah, you guys know they didn't get to the coroner. Another case of someone who displeased the Scientologists. I mean, how many dead bodies have piled up and there's been absolutely zero justice for any of these people, to include children? How many dead bodies? Another case of someone who displeased the Scientologists is shrouded in mystery. It will probably always remain so. According to the London Observer, James Stewart, a 35-year-old encyclopedia salesman from South Africa, was suspended from Scientology because the Scientologists allegedly said he had a history of epilepsy and as such was refused permission to continue Scientology training. Robert Kaufman, a former Scientologist, whose own story will be presented later, was at the Edinburgh org at the same time as Stewart and reported some things that happened that were not printed in the newspaper. He believes the Scientologists placed Stewart's name on the bulletin board and put him in a condition of doubt for having seizures or fits in public, and thereby invalidating Scientology. Oh, that's the black PR, you guys. How dare he have a seizure? How dare he have a seizure? Kaufman was horrified that someone would be punished for a physical ailment over which he had no control, especially since the doubt penalty meant this ill man would have had to work at menial chores for 80 hours straight without sleep. That's the RPF. A few days after the man was placed in doubt, Kaufman was even more upset to see the man's funeral and cremation notice. Oh. Wow. See the man's funeral and cremation notice posted on the bulletin board. A short while later, Kaufman believes it was the afternoon he saw the funeral notice. Kaufman was more shaken when it was announced that the deceased wife had just gone up another very high level in Scientology. Kaufman's suspicion that the 80-hour penalty was connected to this man's death. That's the RPF. They probably put him on the RPF for having a seizure. Was heightened when the return home and one of his Scientology instructors told Kaufman that he had heard that the man hadn't really died at all and that it had all been a mistake. Footnote: Kaufman is not 100% certain of the man's name, but believes that it was Stewart. Stewart and Kaufman were in the same morgue at the same time. In addition, it certainly seems that the man whose Kaufman saw on the bulletin board was Stewart, because it would be extremely unlikely the two men in Edinburgh org, at the same time with their wives, were both suffering from seizures, and both died at the same time. Wow, you guys. I often wonder if some of these deaths are sacrifices to Moloch. Just look it up, please. That's not what the London Observer said. They reported that Stewart was found dead 50 feet below a window. Could that be one of those coerced bluicides? And that it was not a bluicide, please. You guys think someone pushed him? Because the story of his death had been printed in the public press in Scotland, where they do not print names of bluicides, but rather incorporate them into the statistics of the annals of the chief constables. According to the Observer, Stewart's wife said she did not know how her husband's death occurred. She wasn't allowed to. She wasn't allowed to. But she did know that it had nothing to do with Scientology. That's their famous statement. It has nothing to do with Scientology. I'm going to go blow my brains out, but it has nothing to do with Scientology. I'm going to just jump to my death, but it has nothing to do with Scientology. There are so many bluicides, not even reported. If we really started doing a tabulation of all of these, we'd probably be... well, I'm never shocked, but it would just be poignant. Not many Scientologists leave the group voluntarily. Most of them firmly believe in Scientology and believe that it is helping them. But someone who is growing a bit disenchanted may think twice before quitting. Any Scientologist who has ever been thoroughly interrogated, has revealed a great deal of intimate information. It's the blackmail material. Kind of sounds like the Charlie Igloo Alpha. Must be a coincidence. About himself to the auditor whose qualifications and ethical standards could be subject to some question. Also, that's another inversion. There's nothing ethical about any of this. The Rand Daily Mail in Africa reported that an auditor told the South African Inquiry that he was criticized because he kept the files on his patients clean. The same auditor also told the Inquiry that the Scientologists wanted him to jot down the more meaty stuff people disclosed. Wow. He told the Inquiry that when he left Scientology, he removed his files for fear of blackmail. That was smart. Adding that he had often seen Prekler's files with information circled, and with such statements as "we can use this" printed on it. See, some of these folks don't deserve redemption. Some of them don't. They just don't. Perhaps it is not surprising that he was afraid of blackmail. Not only is intimate information kept in files, but the contents of the files are sometimes discussed among Scientologists. At one time, these files were even accidentally accessible to outsiders. Accidental? Former Scientologist photographer Michael Chesed said they were once kept in an unlocked area in back of the secretary's office in New York. In Washington, Hubbard's son said it wasn't difficult for anyone of the founding church to gain access to these files. And in England, the Scientologists were so careless with their records that personal files and documents concerning 2 Scientology PTSs were allegedly found in a garbage dump, read by a workman, and brought to the Sun, who reported the story. In all this time, weirdly enough, none of the authorities or the governments can ever get a hold of any of this evidence. Isn't it amazing, you guys? Freaking amazing. The Board of Australia stated that Hubbard himself was not to be trusted to preserve confidences. They cited the case of a Prekler, I wonder if it was a kid, who was trying desperately to get back in Hubbard's good graces. True narcissism right there. After he had been kicked out of the group. And also go read about some of the Cadet kids. They were always having to do that. Nathan Rich talks about that as well. You always got to prove yourself. In the hopes of a pardon, he abased himself by writing a letter to Hubbard in which he confessed to a number of sins, that's the overts, which ranged from the stealing of 5 shillings from the mantelpiece when he was 6 years old. They got to have you, like, obligated. Fear, obligation, and guilt. It's always the same. The Scientologist produced this letter at the Australian inquiry in an attempt to discredit this witness, and felt that they were justified in doing so because a confession was not made during an auditing session. In Australia, Anderson said he found no evidence of blackmail in the popular sense, but added that the existence of these files containing the most intimate secrets and confessions, those are the overts and withholds. Apparently the FBI doesn't know how to get a hold of that stuff. Crazy. Confessions of thousands of individuals was a constant threat. He added that it was even more serious because copies of these reports are also held at St. Hill Manor. There is no known case of any Scientologist actually having been blackmailed. What? Please. Although someone being blackmailed would not be very likely to admit it. But another question to consider, in addition to whether a person is being blackmailed, is whether he thinks he might be. If a Scientologist was wondering whether or not to leave the group and he heard his auditor discussing his case with a friend, as happened to Ray Buckingham, or he had been criticized for not recording meaty stuff and saw files ringed, we can use this. As in this case of the South African witness, or if he knew that Hubbard had requested files of people who wanted to leave. So see, everybody tries to make like Hubbard some hero. Any Scientologist, number one, that's still, like, what I mean is, any so-called former Scientologist still practicing Scientology, I won't trust them with anything. Me personally. So Hubbard said to investigate at any cost. Isn't that the R245? Someone who had left, or if he knew that his files were easily accessible and that they could be brought out and openly discussed at any time. Sure does remind me of a lot of these politicians that they so-called disgrace, doesn't it? Wouldn't he think that he might be blackmailed and hesitate to leave Scientology? It's the plan, isn't it? Can have complete and utter control over someone. Kind of like all the stuff going on with Diddy, but what do I know? Hubbard may even want pre-clears to think that their secrets might at some time be revealed. It is hard to interpret his statement below, which he wrote in Why People Fight Scientology, in any other way after ambiguously stating that the e-meter can be used in other ways than mental health, he wrote. Somebody as crazy as a coot telling people about mental health. Every professional Scientologist is bound by his code of the Scientologist. You know, I read that and it got like 5 views, which is more strict by far than the codes binding medical doctors and psychiatrists. Kind of like a Freemasonic lodge, but you know. Clause 9 of this code is to refuse to impart the personal secrets of my pre-clears. Anyone's secrets are safe with Scientology until the person himself no longer considers the matter important. A fear of blackmail can keep a Scientologist as tied and subservient to Scientology as actual blackmail. It's the same thing. Yeah. Perhaps more so. Yeah, that's the fear, you guys. Fear, obligation, guilt. Fear, obligation, guilt is what narcissists use. And psychopaths. No J, no job. When someone knows that there is a great deal of personal information that could be revealed, wonder what they had on Rinder or Rathburn, and he is led to believe that it might be revealed, even though no overt threat has been made or payment requested, he must simply sit and wait and wonder. That's called walking on eggshells. They love that shit. So I will leave a link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Peace.